Hi, friends. Today I want to talk about something, I guess, very on topic for my channel, but something I have not talked about yet, and that is manga demographics. And I'll say the main point that I want to make for this video at the beginning, and that is all shoujo manga romance manga? And then the answer is no, it is not. And then I'll get into the why in this video, but I just want if you can leave this video knowing one thing, it's that shoujo doesn't necessarily mean romance. They are two separate things that are often combined, but they are two separate things, and that's very important to remember. Okay, so starting at the beginning. So when I say shoujo manga, what does that mean? So what is what is a manga demographic? A demographic is when somebody creates something, it's the person that they have in mind when they're making it. So if a mangaka or a manga author is writing a manga, they have to kind of picture who will be reading their story. And that imaginary reader or the person they're hoping will read is the demographic. So in manga, both in Japanese manga and English manga, there are four very big manga demographics, and they are shoujo manga, which is manga for younger women, josei manga, which is manga for older women, shonen manga, which is for younger men, and seinen manga, which is for older men. And purely, these are just for categorizing them, and that's it. There are no rules saying only young women are allowed to read the manga for young women and vice versa for everything else. It doesn't matter. In some scenarios, actually, for example, the manga Haikyuu, which is a volleyball manga, is technically it's a shonen manga. But according to a poll, I guess a couple years old now, done by Shonen Jump, overwhelmingly the readership of that shonen manga, that manga tailored for young men, was young women. So oftentimes, just because something has a certain demographic, it doesn't mean that's necessarily who the readership is. It's just the person the author had in mind when they were making it. And that's it. Oftentimes, and it kind of bothers me, people will think because so many of the shoujo, so many of the manga catering for young women are romance manga, they will think, okay, all shoujo manga is romance manga. And while a lot of shoujo manga is romance manga, not all of it is. And it kind of makes me sad when people say, I don't like romance manga, so I hate all shoujo manga. I feel like it's not okay to just brush off an entire demographic purely on what you think it's about. Like even if you're not going to try it, you shouldn't say you don't like it because you haven't even tried it. And a lot of people will think if it is romance, that means it's shoujo, which is not. The very, very big manga that everybody thinks is shoujo is The Fragrant Flower Blooms with Dignity. It's a shonen series. It's a very, very good shonen series, but it's shonen, it's not shoujo. So just because it is romance doesn't mean it's necessarily shoujo. And I think more people need to kind of be able to separate them in their minds. There are many, many romance series that are not shoujo romance series. That's just one's a demographic and one is a genre. So they are not always together. And then I'm going to give a couple examples, I think 4 from each demographic, to show some of the different genres and whatnot that can be in each demographic. And I will start with shoujo just because I really do love shoujo manga. I talk a lot about, I guess it's a little bit confusing. I talk about how I love shoujo and I love horror. And I understand shoujo is a demographic, horror is a genre. They're not all that comparable. But what I mean when I say that is I love basically all shoujo manga. Almost every shoujo manga that I've read, I've liked, or like I've either loved or I was like mildly okay with it. I've never really met one that I like hated or like I really could not stand. Typically, I really, really like shoujo manga. And I like horror. It doesn't really matter on the demographic. Usually, I really like horror. And again, there are shoujo horror series that I love, but there's also seinen horror, which is horror tailored towards older men. There's shonen horror. There's josei horror. Horror can be fit into each of the demographics because it's a genre. I tend to like all horror and I tend to like all shoujo. That's just how I am. But okay, let's talk about some of the shoujo manga that at least I have in my collection. I tried to pick out, I don't have all that many English manga. I moved some of my English manga over here, as you can see. I tried to pick out some English manga just to make it a little bit easier to talk about, but I don't have all that many English manga, so a lot of it's Japanese. Okay, starting off, this one's one of my favorites. Like, all of them are my favorites. I love everything I own. But this one is one of my favorites. It is called Gin no Mugi Batake, or The Silver Wheat Field. This is a fantasy drama shoujo series. I've only read the first volume, though I loved it so much, and I own all three. There is not a hint of romance in this. It is a fantasy adventure series about witches growing wheat with their magic, and then people baking that wheat into delicious foods. It's a shoujo series, it's a fantasy series. There's no romance. It's not a romance book. Maybe there will be a teeny tiny bit of romance near the end. I don't know. But as of volume 1, and as how it's categorized online, it's not a romance. Another shoujo. This is a shoujo horror anthology book called Nozoki Ana, or Peephole would be the English. Anthology horror. Well, there might be like a little bit of like twisted romance here and there in it. It's not a romance story. It's a horror story. Horror. We have this one, which is The Failure at God's School. I have seen people online talking about this as a romantasy, which is romance fantasy combined. However, I'm 5 volumes in. There's no romance. This is a fantasy mystery adventure series. But I do want to make the comment that so this is a fantasy adventure mystery series. If some romance does happen, because I can imagine there will be a little bit of romance. Like, I can see that happening like towards the end or like further on. If a little bit of romance does happen, does that really make it like a romance series? Because overall, this is a fantasy adventure series. I don't think it should be categorized, even if there's a little bit of romance towards the end, as a like romance first, just because it's a shoujo series that has some romance. Because, like, for example, there are so many shonen series that have a little bit of romance, but you would never categorize them as romance. You would categorize them as their other genres. As a big like generalization, take Naruto. Couples get together, people get married, like there is like the teeniest, tiniest tidbit of romance. But would you call Naruto a romance manga? Probably not. You wouldn't. So I think we need to, with shoujo manga, we need to be able to accept that there are other genres than romance. And my last one, this is a romance. This is a romantasy book. Colette is my favorite, and it is romance. I love romance manga. I really, really do like romance. I don't want to say like, don't read romance, like romance isn't good. No, I'm just trying to make the point that it's not just romance. While romance is fantastic and I do love it, it's not the only genre out there when it comes to shoujo manga. That's the point that I'm trying to make. So this one is a romance fantasy book. I feel like this one's more romance first. Their romance drives the story. That's the difference. In The Failure at God's School, romance does not drive the story whatsoever. We have our protagonist, Nagi, trying to find herself and solve a mystery. That's not romance. That's a girl trying to live her life. Verse in Colette, it's very much driven by Colette and Hades' romance. Big difference. Okay, those are all of my shoujo examples. And I will like pause for a second to say, sometimes it can be very difficult to find a manga demographic. So take everything I say after this with a grain of salt. Manga demographics really don't matter all that much. I will say, like, read what you like. Honestly, if something seems interesting you, it really doesn't matter who it's tailored towards. If you want to read it, read it. A lot of the time, because like I do like to know the demographics, but a lot of the time, depending on the website that you search, it'll give you a different demographic. The biggest contender is this series right here, which I love so much. This is Hanako-kun. Depending on where you search, this will tell you it's either a shoujo, which I don't really think it is, or a shonen series. And I'm so confused. Personally, I do think it's shonen, but I don't know. I do like, sometimes people will say it's a youth comic. It's for the youths. And I do like that because I do feel like, especially series like Hanako-kun, it's good for both. Like it could fit both shonen and shoujo. Personally, I do think it leans a little bit towards shonen, but I do like the idea. Yeah, it's a youth comic. It's okay. It's for the youths. But yeah, so take everything I say from here on out with a little grain of salt. I use the manga website Seymour Comics. It's a Japanese site, and typically it is very reliable, in my opinion, for categorizing the demographics. So I trust it. Sometimes it is easier than others to like infer whether something is shoujo or shonen or whatever, depending on its imprint or the manga magazine that it's published in. And I could talk more about manga magazines and imprints in a different video if you are interested. Okay, staying with the girlies. Again, according to Seymour Comics manga demographic ranking, not rankings, but like how they categorize everything, the categorization, that's the word. These are josei comics, or comics for like older women. Again, I don't have all that many English. I think, yeah, all of these are Japanese, but that's okay. Starting off with this vampire series called Hanahimeru Kimi no Meteoru. So this is a romance, but it's a dark romance fantasy series. So again, all of the demographics do have or can have romance. They all have different genres. This is an example of a romance. The next one, I always have seen it as a josei series, but this is another one that, depending on where you look for what the demographic is, it does change. So now, like, I do not trust it whatsoever, but Google AI calls this a seinen now, which I don't know. Again, this is another youth comic, maybe, but I have seen it being categorized as a josei online, and I agree with that, which is The Summer Hikaru Died. This one, it's like, it's a special series. This is a horror. It is BL now. It is a horror series, though, first and foremost. Depending on where you look, it'll tell you a multitude of different demographics, which is a little bit confusing, but a lot of people call this a youth series, but Seymour Comics, which I trust, calls it a josei, so that's what I categorize it as. One that I'm absolutely not confused about is the horror series Brutal. This one is a josei series. This one is, it's a horror. Look at the cover, you know, it's a horror series. There is no romance. It is purely, strictly horror, and it's a very good horror. And then just good old romance in the josei category is Hug, Kiss, Hug. This one, it's clearly a josei series. You feel it when you read it. It is pure romance. And it's a cute series. I talked about it a little earlier. I have my complaints with it, but overall it is cute. Moving on now to my shonen series. And I will say my shonen collection is the smallest in all of my collection, but I do still have some. Starting with Noragami. This one holds such a near and dear place to my heart. This is a special edition. I cannot believe I got it. I want to brag about that a little bit, but this is overall a fantasy adventure series. I would not categorize Noragami as romance in the least, but this is an example of a shonen series. Another one that I guess depending on who you ask would call it technically, like it has its romance, is Chainsaw Man. This is another one of my favorites. I saw the Daisy Arc movie a couple weeks ago. It was so good. But so Chainsaw Man, it's a horror adventure. Like technically there is tidbits of romance here and there, but you would not call Chainsaw Man a romance. I don't think. I guess depending on who you ask, but horror adventure. And this one is a Shonen Jump series. And again, I'll make a video about the imprints and whatnot later, but it's Shonen Jump. Obviously, it's a shonen. It is for younger men. Another one that I guess depending on who you ask, some people thought this was a shoujo series, but it's not. This is boyfriend, sometimes girlfriend. Yeah. This is very much a shonen romance series. So romance, but I don't know. It's being categorized in English as a shoujo, like by some people from what I've seen online. This is not a shoujo series. This is a shonen series. I thought it was shoujo, so I read it. And I love shoujo romance. I really don't like shonen romance all that much. That's just me. Just a lot of the time I know, like I read it and I'm like, yeah, like I'm not the demographic for this. Like I can really feel it. All other shonen genres typically I do like more or less, but shonen romance just typically I don't like. So when I read this thinking it was shoujo, and I was like, wow, like there's something about it just I don't love. And then I looked it up and it is indeed a shonen. I was like, okay, like that makes sense. Like I'm not the target audience for this, and I really don't like it. So it made sense for me. But one shonen romance, this is another outlier that I did really like, is You and I Are Polar Opposites. This is also a Shonen Jump one, so obviously it is a shonen romance. But this one is very cute. Also, like just romance. Now, lastly, let's take a look at all of my seinen examples, which is for older men. And I will state again that all of the ones categorized as seinen, I checked in with Seymour Comics first. So if you want to say that's not a seinen, that's a other demographic, take it up with Seymour Comics because I trust them. And the first one up is Dogs Red. When I first read this, I had actually thought this was a shonen series, not a seinen series, but according to Seymour Comics, it is a seinen series. The main character is a younger man. Like he's still, I think he's a teenager. But even then, just because the main character is like a young man doesn't mean it's going to be tailored for a young man. Just like sometimes shonen comics have a female main character. Does not matter. So Dogs Red is a story about hockey. Basically, it's about hockey. I really like this. As a Canadian, I have to like stories about hockey. It's just a given. But this is an example of a seinen series, no romance whatsoever. This is a hockey series. Another example of a seinen series with a female main character is Eden of Witches. I love this so much. This is, I cannot recommend this enough. So good. This one, no romance. This one is a series about a young witch named Petey who has to like run away from humanity and find the Eden of Witches, basically. This is a fantasy, no romance series. Another fantasy, seinen. I was surprised that this one came up as seinen. This is published in Afternoon Casey, and this is A Kingdom of Quartz. This one does have an English publication, just I don't have it. This one is another no romance whatsoever. This is a fantasy series with a young female main character. One that I was actually just gifted, and I'm so excited to read, that I knew it was a seinen when it arrived in the mail, is Mushishi. I don't know much about this. I do know it is like it's a fantasy series, and from what I know, no romance. I guess I don't really read. I don't have a lot of seinen romance, but Mushishi is another fantasy seinen series. From what I can tell, no romance. I do want to give example. I forgot I didn't take any out of a seinen romance in my collection, and I'll do this one, which is Kawaii no wa ore de aru. This one, I think you can tell from the cover. Honestly, it's a seinen romance. Typically, when it comes to romance, I know myself. Typically, I tend to like the shoujo romance more than anything else. Just that's who I am. Sometimes there will be a shonen or a seinen romance series that I like. So like I try out everything because I don't know what I like or what I dislike until I try reading it. I'll never ever read a seinen romance because I'm not a man. Like I'll never say that. I'll try everything. And if I don't like something, that's okay. I tried it. I didn't like it. Now I know. So I know personally, while I tend to enjoy shoujo romances, doesn't mean I don't like other romances. So, moral of this video, I think it's important to be open, at least, to trying out all of the demographics and not just thinking that because something is romance, it's a shoujo. Because, as I just showed, there are romance series for all of the demographics, not just shoujo.